Hannah Carter stepped onto the plane with quiet confidence. Her simple hoodie and jeans did little to hint at her role as a successful tech entrepreneur. With her laptop bag in hand, she made her way to her first-class seat, a reward for her tireless work and recent successes. She glanced at the other passengers as she settled into her seat, nodding politely to the middle-aged man beside her. The man raised an eyebrow and immediately pressed the call button for assistance. Margaret Pearson, the head flight attendant, appeared moments later. Her cold gaze shifted between the man and Hannah. "What seems to be the problem, sir?" Margaret asked. "Are you sure she's supposed to be here?" the man said, nodding toward Hannah. "I mean, no offense, but this doesn't look right. Probably a reward ticket or something." "Doubt she paid for it." Hannah's lips tightened, but she remained silent, reaching into her bag for her boarding pass. Margaret frowned as Hannah handed it over. She scrutinized it, her eyes narrowing. "This must be some mistake," Margaret said, ignoring Hannah entirely. Turning to the man, she added in a lower tone, "We've had issues like this before. I'll handle it." "Excuse me," Hannah interjected, her voice steady. "There's no mistake. That's my ticket." Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. "Ma'am, I'll need you to come with me to verify this." "Verify what?" Hannah asked, her patience waning. "It's a valid ticket and I'm in the correct seat." Margaret's voice grew louder, drawing attention from nearby passengers. "Ma'am, please don't make this difficult. If you don't comply, I'll have to call security." The man beside her smirked, leaning back in his seat. "Knew it," he muttered, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. The cabin grew uncomfortably quiet as passengers turned to watch the scene. A child's voice broke the silence. "Mom, is it because she's black?" Gasps rippled through the cabin. Margaret's face flushed, but she stood firm, gesturing for Hannah to follow her. With a deep breath, Hannah rose, gathering her belongings and walking to the economy section. Phones discreetly captured every moment of the humiliating scene. Hannah sat in her cramped economy seat, her mind racing, but her face an unreadable mask. She pulled out her phone and began typing a message to her assistant. "Document everything. Prepare a statement. This isn't over." As she tucked her bag under the seat, an elderly white woman in the row ahead yanked it out and shoved her own oversized purse in the spot. "This is better used for something important," the woman muttered without looking at Hannah. "Excuse me," Hannah said evenly. "That space is for my bag." The woman turned, her expression dripping with disdain. "Maybe if you belonged in this cabin, you'd know better. Learn your place." Hannah's hands gripped the armrests as she fought to keep her voice steady. "That bag contains my work equipment. It needs to go back." The woman snorted. "Work? What do you do? Steal Wi-Fi?" A younger man sitting across the aisle interjected. "Hey, that's uncalled for." But the woman waved him off. "It's about time someone told these people the truth." Hannah didn't respond. Her knuckles turned white as she slowly exhaled, reminding herself to stay composed. Any outburst could escalate the situation further, and she couldn't afford that now. The younger flight attendant, Sarah, noticed the commotion and approached quickly. "Is everything all right here?" Hannah gestured toward her bag. "This passenger has taken the storage space I was using." Sarah turned to the elderly woman, her tone polite but firm. "Ma'am, this space is assigned to the passenger sitting here. I'll need you to remove your bag." The woman scoffed. "This is ridiculous. They're lucky to even be here." Sarah didn't flinch. "Ma'am, please comply or I'll need to escalate this matter." The woman huffed loudly but removed her bag, slamming it into the seat beside her. Hannah quietly thanked Sarah, who gave her a sympathetic look before returning to her duties. Meanwhile, back in first class, Margaret returned to her duties, her confidence unshaken. The middle-aged man from before leaned back with a satisfied grin. "You'd think they'd know better by now," he said to another passenger. "First class is for people who can afford it." By the time the plane reached cruising altitude, the corporate office of the airline was in chaos. Executives huddled around a screen displaying the viral video. "Who is she?" one of them demanded. An assistant rushed in, holding a tablet. "Hannah Carter. She's the largest individual shareholder of our airline and CEO of a tech company valued at billions." Gasps filled the room. The CEO ran a hand through his hair. "Get me the captain immediately." Back on the plane, Margaret strutted through first class, oblivious to the growing storm. The man beside Hannah's former seat shook his head. I'm telling you, people like her don't belong up here. Margaret laughed, but Sarah's voice cut through. Enough, that's uncalled for. Margaret glared at her. Watch your tone, Sarah. Meanwhile, Hannah's phone buzzed. It was her attorney. Document everything, the message read. We're ready. Shock moment. An executive gasped as a new notification appeared on their phone. The hashtag has over 1 million tweets. This is spiraling. The captain, alerted by the corporate office, summoned Margaret to the cockpit. We've been ordered to address this situation immediately. Apologize and restore her seat. Margaret's face reddened. With all due respect, Captain, she doesn't belong there. That's not for you to decide, the captain snapped. Do it now. Margaret stormed out but didn't follow the captain's orders. Instead, she whispered to Sarah, she can stay in economy. It's better for everyone. Hannah overheard the exchange and stood up. Her voice was calm but firm. This ends now. Passengers turned to watch as Hannah walked toward the front of the plane. Margaret blocked her path. Ma'am, sit down or I'll call security. Hannah met her gaze evenly. Please do. I'd love to explain this to them. A man in the aisle stood up. We're all watching, he said loudly. Applause erupted from several passengers. Margaret's face turned pale. As the flight continued, whispers circulated throughout the cabin. A young black couple in the economy section shared with Hannah how they too had experienced similar treatment from the airline. The woman recounted an incident where she was questioned about her passport, despite being a U.S. citizen, while white passengers breezed through without scrutiny. Hannah listened attentively, her calm demeanor masking a growing anger. Did you report it? She asked. We tried, the man said, but they said it was a misunderstanding. No one took us seriously. Back in first class, Margaret's attempts to maintain control unraveled further. An elderly white woman asked, why did you move that young lady? She was so polite and professional. Margaret's response was curt. We have protocols, ma'am. The woman frowned. Your protocols seem awfully selective. Meanwhile, a young child's drawing was shared on social media. It depicted Hannah being moved to the back of the plane with the words, why, scrawled in crayon. The image went viral, intensifying the online backlash. Shock moment. A leaked internal email revealed the airline had a risk profiling system that disproportionately flagged non-white passengers for additional scrutiny, further fueling public outrage. Hannah felt the collective weight of stories shared by other passengers in the economy cabin. The young black couple beside her recounted their experiences, and a nervous-looking flight attendant whispered, we all know it's wrong, but what can we do? Meanwhile, in first class, Margaret attempted to regain control of the narrative. She loudly defended her actions, saying, I only acted based on protocol. These people always try to exploit the system. Her words carried over to Sarah, who stood frozen for a moment before stepping into the galley to compose herself. She texted a colleague, this is getting out of hand. Margaret's gone too far, and now everyone's recording. Shock moment. Another passenger in first class pulled out their phone and loudly declared, we've all seen enough. I'm emailing this to the airline right now. Let's see how they spin it. As the plane began its descent, the tension in the cabin was palpable. Social media had exploded, and Margaret was alerted to a new message from the corporate office. Restore the passenger's seat immediately. Non-compliance will result in disciplinary action. Margaret, fuming, stomped to the economy section. Miss Carter, she said tersely, you are requested to return to first class. Her tone was far from apologetic. Hannah met Margaret's glare with quiet defiance. No, thank you, she replied. I'll remain here. Gas rippled through the cabin. Margaret's face turned a deeper shade of red as whispers swirled. Passengers realized that Hannah's refusal was more than an act of defiance. It was a stand against humiliation. Shock moment. Upon landing, security officers and airline executives were waiting. As passengers disembarked, many paused to shake Hannah's hand, whisper words of encouragement, or give her a knowing nod. Once off the plane, Hannah was escorted to a private lounge where lawyers from her team awaited her arrival. Meanwhile, Margaret was summoned for questioning. The viral video had reached mainstream news outlets. and headlines like "Airline Faces Backlash Over Racism" were spreading rapidly. Margaret attempted to justify her actions in the face of growing evidence against her. "She looks suspicious," Margaret stammered. "I was just following my instincts." The head of human resources, who had reviewed the leaked email about risk profiling, folded her arms. "Your instincts or your biases?" An internal memo from the airline CEO addressing systemic racism in their protocols was leaked by an anonymous employee, turning the company's troubles into a full-blown scandal. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the verdict in Hannah Carter's lawsuit against the airline was announced. The jury found the airline guilty of systemic racial discrimination, awarding Hannah $100 million in damages. The court also mandated comprehensive reforms, including mandatory anti-bias training for all employees and the immediate dismissal of individuals responsible for the profiling protocols. Margaret Pearson sat in the courtroom, her face pale. Her own testimony had done her no favors, and the evidence against her, videos, leaked emails, and corroborations from passengers, was insurmountable. The judge declared her actions a glaring example of unchecked prejudice and barred her from working in any customer-facing role in the aviation industry. During the press conference following the verdict, Hannah revealed she would donate $75 million of her settlement to fund a groundbreaking initiative aimed at eradicating racial bias in customer service industries. With the funds from her settlement, Hannah launched Equity in Motion, a nonprofit organization dedicated to combating discrimination. The nonprofit provided legal aid to victims of racial bias, partnered with corporations to develop anti-racism policies, and offered resources for marginalized communities. But Hannah didn't stop there. Leveraging her expertise in technology, she spearheaded the development of a revolutionary app called VoiceOut. The app allowed users to document and report instances of discrimination in real time, creating a centralized database of complaints. The app also provided resources, legal contacts, and immediate action templates for users to seek justice. The app quickly went viral. Social media erupted with stories shared through VoiceOut, amplifying the voices of those who had long been ignored. Within weeks, it became the top downloaded app in its category, and governments around the world began to take notice. The app's first viral success came when a user documented a high-profile case of workplace discrimination that led to the resignation of a major CEO. The world watched as Hannah's creation began reshaping industries beyond aviation. Hannah became the face of a growing movement. She was invited to speak at global forums where her powerful speeches galvanized audiences. "This isn't just about my experience," she said during a United Nations summit. "It's about dismantling a culture that normalizes injustice. Together, we can build systems that treat every individual with dignity." Margaret, meanwhile, faced public backlash that extended far beyond the courtroom. She became a symbol of prejudice and was ostracized in her community. Attempts to defend herself in interviews only deepened public outrage as her unapologetic attitude became evident. Hannah refused to focus on Margaret's downfall. "This isn't about one person," she said in an interview. "It's about addressing the structures that allow prejudice to thrive." Margaret's actions were a symptom of a larger problem, and that's what we're working to change. A year after the trial, the airline released a public report showcasing the sweeping changes it had implemented. The report credited Hannah's advocacy for sparking the transformation, a rare acknowledgement of accountability in the corporate world. 2 years after the incident, the impact of Hannah's work was undeniable. VoiceOut had expanded globally, and governments began adopting its framework to address systemic bias in various sectors. Equity in Motion became a household name, and its campaigns were credited with reducing instances of racial discrimination in customer service by 40% within its first year. Hannah's efforts also inspired a wave of grassroots movements. Communities organized local initiatives to educate people about implicit bias, and schools incorporated anti-racism modules into their curriculums. The ripple effect of her advocacy reached corners of society she had never imagined. On a routine flight years later, Hannah noticed the flight attendants treating every passenger with genuine warmth and respect. A young black woman sitting in first class exchanged a knowing glance with her, a silent acknowledgement of how far they had come. As Hannah disembarked, she noticed Margaret working as a janitor in the terminal. Their eyes met briefly. Margaret looked away, her face a mixture of shame and regret. Hannah didn't stop but offered a quiet, empathetic smile. a symbol of the grace she had carried throughout her journey. A new horizon, Hannah stood on the stage of an international summit, addressing leaders from around the world. Behind her, a screen displayed testimonials from VoiceOut users and statistics showcasing the app's success. "This is just the beginning," she said, her voice steady and resolute. "Together we've shown that change is possible." But the fight for equality isn't a destination. It's a journey. Let's continue to challenge injustice and create a world where dignity isn't a privilege but a right. The audience erupted into a standing ovation as Hannah stepped off the stage. She had become more than a survivor of injustice. She was a catalyst for change, proving that one voice could inspire a global movement toward equality and humanity. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please support me by clicking the logo in the bottom right corner to subscribe to my channel. This way you won't miss any of the exciting stories coming up. Thank you so much.